and welcome to today's episode of Spec Steppin, where we are stepping through the API web spec. In today's episode, we're going to talk about the edit context API. As you can see from the documents on the screen, this is an experimental technology. It is not to be used in production. Well, you could, but I wouldn't recommend it to use it in production. I personally do not use any experimental technologies in production unless you twist my arm, but because they can break things. So I would highly recommend you don't do that. Now, in this API, this is an interesting API because how they tout it in the documents, in my opinion, is not the way it actually functions. At least as I understand things such as rich text editors. So, see in the documentation, it says this API can be used to build rich text editors that can support advanced text input experiences, like emoji pickers and all that stuff. Now, yes, you could. It would be, you'd have to have a lot of complex code to do things like an emoji picker and things like that without a library. At this point, in my estimation, if someone else knows how to do it with some simple vanilla JS, by all means, let me know. But this typically, what I see in the demo I'm going to show you, simply you type in like a text area field, and the edit context API allows you to grab that information and do stuff with it on the page. So, um, you can grab it via the keyboard, mouse, and all that stuff, which you can do anyway without necessarily using this API. So I think this API has a ways to go to be functional, to be what I would consider a rich text editor. If I were needing this rich text editing functionality, I would probably at this point, based on where this API is, I would go with a library of some sort out there that where someone else has done the heavy lifting for me. But basically, you can take the text and do stuff with it, which again, you can do anyway without this API. So I think this API has some ways to go. Now, again, you can do stuff like here. It talks about using a canvas element to render the text and things like that. So you're going to see how I do it on the page. It's nothing really fancy, but let me just first show you the demo. So I have some content here, just and a link to the documentation here for you if you happen to download this from my Git repo. But basically, I have an editable area here. I have my console open because I have some logging that I'm going to show you. But here's the output. I have some current text that says start typing here, so it's a watching of that. And then the index of start and end. So let me just put in here. So now if you notice, I have the text and I start typing here. Actually, it's not a placeholder. It's actually text I have in there, but I have the code set up that it goes away as I start typing. So if I type a T this, and now before I go and type in my little sentence here, notice what it did. It replaced my current text T, it replaced the index. It's now in the first position. And I just am logging out what is the update that's been received. In this case, it's a T here. So as you can see right there for the text. Now, if I put a H, you can see here it received an H right there. So this and everything's updated on the fly. An example. So it typed it all in, told me how far it is and everything. So let's jump over the code and I'll show you kind of how I built this. Again, it's not super fancy and you don't necessarily need the edit context API for this, but again, think it has potential. So just my text here, basically the HTML, I have a div that I'm using for my editable area. And for my output, I'm just using paragraph tags with some span tags. Again, like the documents show, you can use a canvas tag and things like that, but I'm not doing that. And I just have some basic style stuff in here just for prettying it up. But here's where the work actually takes place. So here, I have an if statement just to check if edit context is in window. Otherwise, I'm alerting that it does not support it, and then I'm changing the inner HTML of the body. Now, side note, I was being a little lazy here. Full disclosure, I personally, in production, I would never use inner HTML. I always use text content, and so I would grab the heading, the paragraphs, and all that and use text content. Now, the reason I do that, if you are more of a junior dev, inner HTML, I don't think it's officially a part of the spec, but it might be. But I haven't read the spec in quite a while. I think it's a holdover from the old days where maybe there's JavaScript and things like that. But inner HTML, as you can see, I can just use a string because HTML is string or nothing but strings. And so I can put this code in here. The problem with inner HTML is there are some security risks based on how you use it, where since it renders these tags, I could put a script tag in there, for example, and have some goofy stuff happen. So I tend to stay away. And if I'm building a production app, I would never use inner HTML for that. But in this case, I was simply being lazy and I just wanted to be able to put that in there. But if you're because this is an experimental API anyway, I wouldn't put it in production. So, just a little side note, so that anybody out there that sees the inner HTML and like, what are you doing? I was just being lazy. So I'm grabbing all my DOM pieces of the DOM, the spans, the start, end, text span, editable area. And here, and I have all this commented, as you can see, so you can download from my Git repo and mess with it as you see fit to try to learn it. So I just create a edit context region, and then I attach that context to my DOM element. So I grab the editable area that I grabbed up here, which is, if I jump back over here, that's simply my div. So I grab that, and then in the edit context property, I make it equal to this edit context. Okay, so that way it will attach it to it. Now, here's what's interesting. Notice it's a div. I made it editable so they can type in the div. So that's, if I'm doing this another way, I could use text area and do it that way and not necessarily need the edit context. But so this shows you how I can do it with a simple div. Now, again, I can use attributes such as content editable and stuff. That's beyond the scope of what I want to cover here, but I would encourage you to look into that. So here, though, in my state management, I start with making the start typing here, the content, grab the length of that content, just counts the number of characters basically. And then I just add a flag just to make sure that see if the content is still there or not, because I'm replacing it as you saw in my little quick demo. So then this update display is where all the magic happens. I'm going to jump though down to here because I'm going to come back to that update display. So down to here, I'm adding in some listeners. I have a text update. So that edit context field, I'm listening for when the text gets updated. When that text gets updated, as you can see here, let me see, it says text update event received. So that's this console log. And the event that logs out is that I typed in a T in this case, as that example. So I'm listening in that div for when the text gets typed in there. So then I have a update start, update end, or that event I'm just putting in ranges for when it starts and stops. And I'm making the text of that event match my new text. So that T would be the value of new text. Then I'm seeing if the initial placeholder is there or not. If you saw that, I did that. Where is that? Right here. It's a Boolean setup here on line 42. I'm seeing if that's true, then I'm wiping that out. I'm clearing that out, that content, and I'm setting up the start to 0 because I'm starting all the way over there, and then I'm setting this to false. So it just checks it once and wipes it out. So otherwise, if I'm already typing, like I typed the T and that was 1 was the range. And so right here, see, instead of down here 0, 0, my effective update start when I typed the H would have been 1 and 1 for that. But yeah, 1 and 1. And then here I'm taking my current content and I'm just grabbing what the current string is, putting the new text. I'm just doing concatenation is basically all I'm doing. So I'm just basically putting those pieces of the characters together, updating the start and end, and then I'm just logging that to the log file here, right here. So see how it says text update 1 and 1, and then down here, this said text update. Here, let me just minimize some of this so it's easier to read. So text up 2 and 2, 3 and 3, 4 and 4. So I'm keeping track of where I'm at basically. I probably could have done one since they're both the same, but I thought maybe if I do a range. And then I'm calling my update display. That's the heavy lifter that I'm going to cover in just a second. I also have here an event listener for when the selection is changed. So if I go back in here and I'm just going to clear this out. I'm going to highlight that. Oops, I need to make sure I'm in the field. And I'm going to just text update event, and I'm going to do sample. Okay, see how it does 8, 9, 10. Now, if I am changing a selection, it'll have a selection change event. That's when the editable content changes. And again, you're updating the display with the heavy lifting. Then I have a character bounds update. So that's when if we need to know precisely the pixels and things, that's an event where within a given range of text, if you're trying to position things for spell check underlines, and like I have here in this example. So that's if you're using a canvas. I'm not using canvas, so it's not really functional here. But if you're doing something more complex, you can do that. I didn't want to have this be a hour-long video. So but I do have some code here to help you out, maybe get you started where you can grab the characters and find out what's editing and maybe do some spell check stuff and underline it and all that good stuff. So I just have some code here for that. And then I have here a composition start event. So this allows you to render underlined text, implementing composition rendering complex events, basically. So I have one there, update. See, all these are logs. I don't have them actually implemented. Composition in, text format. So there's some things there that I just put in here as placeholders if you want to mess with these a little more. But I'm not using them in this update. So, or this demo. So now the heavy lifter update display. Let me find that one. So here, what this does, just like my comment says, it basically renders, it does all the heavy lifting and renders the current selection of the editable area. So it grabs grabs the text content, makes it equal to the current content, sets the start and end, sets the text content equal to the current content. I use a get selection method to grab what I'm grabbing, clear the selections first, and then I'm saying, okay, if it's equal to 0, then what I'm doing is I'm emptying everything out. So basically let me show you what this does. So if I get rid of it and I go back to 0 here, so I'm zeroing everything out. Okay, so what it will do is it empties out all the text, pins it, and sets my range back to start, sets everything to 0, basically resets everything if I'm deleting. Otherwise, if the content's not empty, it's going to proceed as usual. So I grab my text node. So I grab the editable area, the first child of the editable area, which is the text node. And so in this case, let me just go back. Let me just refresh here. So the word this, for example, would be the text node. And I just make sure that it's a type of text node. And then I create the range, start and stop, and set start, set in, add range. Then if I just have a warning there if something happens, if it's not a text node, it's something goofy happens, it sets everything back to 0. But basically I grab the start, grab the stop as I'm typing in, and I'm just appending it to it. That's where the actual heavy lifting occurs. Otherwise it throws an error. So again, allows you to just create an editable area out of your HTML, like in my case, a div tag. So I would recommend you take a look if you're curious about this API. Take a look at the documents here. Take a look at my starting code. If you want to do something more complex with the canvas tag and do something more rich text editor-ish, then great, go for it. I personally am waiting for them to make that native so that I don't have to rely on a library necessarily to do that. Otherwise, it's a lot of work to build that rich text editor. If anybody has experience in doing that and knows an easier way to do that, by all means, let me know. Otherwise, take a look at this. If you have any questions, let me know. And if not, happy stepping.